Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Work Horizons Coaching Hub launch. We're really grateful that you've chosen to join us today as we celebrate the formal launch of our Coaching Hub. We're looking forward to sharing with you some of our coaching experiences, tools, and techniques in the hope that you'll take something away that will help you be able to better face some of the challenges that you, your team, and organisations are facing at the moment. It's lovely to have so many friends, clients, and colleagues here with us today. Thank you again. I'm now going to move you on to show you some more friendly faces. So these are some of our Work Horizons associates, many of whom are coaches. Some have very specialist coaches practices around relocation, for example, with Tina Smith, and well-being with Malcolm, through to team and leadership coaching, and we've got some specialists in those areas to speak today. For those who don't know me, I'm Diane Rance, and I'm leading the Work Horizons Coaching Hub. And I'm delighted to be joined by such a varied and wide range of experienced, qualified and accredited coaches to be with me today and work with me going forwards. We're also really keen to hear more about you and your coaching experiences. So we'd love you to introduce yourselves in the chat function. And we'd also like you to share your questions with us in the Q&A function on the right-hand side. We're going to hear from our speakers, and then we're going to move on to have a general open discussion where we'll address some of your questions that you posed to us today. So please share with us a bit about yourselves, introduce yourselves, and then share your questions with us. We're also keen to learn more about how you use coaching currently. So we have available a poll, which our lovely assistant Bella is going to share with us now. So we'd like your feedback on how your organisation has used coaching in the past. Please tick as many of these that apply to you and your organisation. And then we'll come back to this later after we've heard from our four speakers. As I said, we're really keen to have a conversation with you. So please keep those questions and those comments coming. So why are we here today? About 5 years ago, I had a conversation with one of my colleagues here today, Dr. Anne Terry, and we asked ourselves the question, why doesn't Birmingham have a specialist coaching practice? There are lots in London, but at that time, we couldn't think of one specialist coaching practice, one sort of one-stop shop based in the Birmingham area. Lots of coaches, lots of coaching practices with a particular specialism, but we couldn't think of a generic one-stop shop for coaching. So move forward 5 years, and it seems to us that now is the chance for that coaching hub to be launched and to be available to practices within Birmingham. However, we've stretched our horizons in accordance with our name, and we're now working nationally, and one day we hope working internationally as well. As coaches, we're very aware of how organisations can support individuals, teams in times of great uncertainty. And of course, that's very much what we've seen in the last 12 months. And so we think coaching can be one of those developmental tools that you can bring to your organisation at individual, team and organisation level. And our speakers today will look at those three levels. So a coaching hub, why a hub? A hub, thanks you to our Work Horizons associate colleague, Peter McCann, is because we think ourselves as a starting point for your journey, your coaching journey for change. As those of you who are based in the Birmingham area will know, New Street Station is the hub of the rail network. It's possible to travel anywhere from New Street Station. And we see our hub as a place where you can start any of your coaching journeys. So before I hand you over to our speakers, I'll again encourage you to respond to our poll. I'm then going to introduce you to our speakers just to say a brief introduction about themselves. And then I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Harry Dunleavy, to talk more about the role of coaching in organisations from his perspective as a highly experienced HR director. So thank you again for coming along and supporting us today as we celebrate this launch. And I'm going to hand over to Lorna now to introduce herself. Thank you, Lorna.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really great that you've been able to join us. My name's Lorna Wallace Davis. I am a learning and OD specialist. Mostly I'm a carer, but when I'm not doing that, I'm a learning and OD specialist. I'm also a registered social worker, qualified coach, and I'm a non-exec director for a housing association. So I'm going to hand over to Anne, I think.
Thanks, Lorna. And again, a very warm welcome to you. Beautiful day. Great to have you all on board at this exciting start of our coaching hub. As Dan says, my name's Anne Terry, and I'm a team leadership and exec coach, and I'm also a facilitator. I've been coaching for over 20 years when I was doing the sums the other night. And I work with a wide variety of organisations, from pharma, global luxury brands, the NHS, currently doing quite a lot of work in the tertiary education sector, regulatory bodies, and some overseas charities. In terms of what I provide as a coach, is about creating that safe space, a safe yet challenging space for leaders, so providing that thinking partnership so that they can explore the challenges they need to move forward and move their teams forward. So I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Fiona for her to introduce herself.
So good afternoon, everyone. It's a delight. I would like to say it's a delight to see you. And wouldn't it have been lovely if we could have met over a cup of coffee or even a bottle of champagne as we're celebrating the launch of this great hub. So thank you for joining us. My name is Fiona Anderson. My background is in change and transformation, set up change management in Royal Mail, led in very large national projects, and set up in my own business 15 years ago. And that business is about change. More recently moved into really focusing on how to develop that highly productive culture. So I work with executives, leadership teams, anybody in the business. I work with human beings. I work with people. I just love working with people, and really focus on values-centered transformation, where what we do is absolutely rooted in the belief that it is your people, it's you, each and every one of you here, who grow your business. And again, that safe and confidential space for you to reflect. And I think that's so important. What have we learned from the last year? What's more important to us now? What are we taking forward with us? So that you can stretch and grow and thrive in whatever is ahead of us. So look forward to telling you more shortly. And I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Mike.
Good afternoon. My name's Mike Thorne. It's actually 2 years to the day since I left the world of corporate work, set up on my own as a coach. And I'm delighted to be an associate with Work Horizons. My focus is on helping businesses and their leaders to rediscover their purpose and direction. And I do that in a number of ways, but principally through leadership coaching, working with individuals, and also some strategy coaching, working with businesses to think and plan ahead for the future. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that a little further on in the session today. So I'll hand back over now to Harry, and he's going to share a few thoughts with you now.
Thanks very much, Mike. Great to see everybody here today. And I'm Harry Dunleavy. I'm part of the Work Horizons team. I've had a long career in HR, longer than I'd like to admit to. But I've been fortunate enough to hold a number of senior HR director appointments. And coaching has been very much part of what I've learned and experienced over the years, personally as well as professionally. Before I just make a few comments about that, let me just again remind you about the poll. We're getting some great responses. Thank you. Developing leaders is out in front. I think we had our money on probably that one. But it'd be interesting to see what the other results come through. And please add any questions in the Q&A or any comments. And we'll get to a Q&A session a bit later with the panel, and we'll pick up those questions. So just some comments from me about coaching, really. Throughout my long career in HR, I've really seen it firsthand, the impact that coaching can have on individuals and organizations. And I believe there really has never been a better time for deploying coaching within an organization. And after the experience of the last 12 months, people and organizations are looking for a sense of renewal, direction, and purpose, and are looking for professional support to help with that. I think the perception of coaching has moved on from being something of a crutch for individuals to being an integral part of how individuals and organizations develop and grow. And I think that coaching in the workplace is one of the best ways to build engagement and positive interactions within the organization. And it's interesting that a number of progressive businesses now provide coaches for their people as part of their benefits package. Within our team, I know the depth of skill and experience that we have within the coaching cohort is really unequaled. And our track record demonstrates positive and lasting results coming from our involvement and professional contribution. And the way we work, whether it's with individuals or organizations, is to use a combination of experienced consultants and qualified coaches. So what are the benefits of coaching? Well, as I see it, it helps develop better interpersonal skills, change and develop these behaviors, and recognize and modify self-limiting beliefs. As far as leadership is concerned, I think it helps leaders to think and plan more strategically, to manage risk more effectively, and to create and communicate vision and mission. Really important things for everyone right now. I think it supports the development of a culture of trust and personal responsibility, both within the organization and externally with clients and customers. I think it enables individuals to use their personal power effectively. And last but not least, it can develop those qualities that have been proven to be associated with success. Let me now hand you over to Lorna to talk more about individual coaching.
Thank you very much, Harry. And I'm just going to follow on and pick up some of the threads that Harry's shared with you. As part of my conversation, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about why individuals might choose to come and join and have a coaching relationship and want to explore what we can do in a coaching relationship. Sorry. It's just going off there. So it's an opportunity to explore current and future options. And certainly the last 12 months have been so difficult and such a time of change for so many of us that what coaching can do is it can offer us that space just to think about actually what is going on at the moment. There are so many things occupying the minds of leaders and leadership teams that what coaching can do is to just give you a little bit of space to think, what are our really pressing and most important issues and what are we going to do about them? It's something about exploring a present challenge. And I think this is one of the things that we can do where we can work quite quickly. So one of the relationships I had was with a head teacher, very quick intervention where she was wanting to explore a meeting that she was going to be having in the next couple of weeks, where potentially there were going to be some conflict and it was going to be quite a dynamic situation. So we were able just to role play a little bit that conversation in terms of what she wanted to do, the outcome that she wanted to achieve, and to provide a framework for that conversation. And she was able to go into that meeting feeling like she knew exactly how she was going to play it and also some of the issues that might arise. And just being able to support someone right in the moment is absolutely key to the coaching relationship. Also part of the coaching then is about developing that deeper understanding of yourself. You know, as far as I'm concerned, you can never have too much feedback. And so there's something about actually, what do I need to learn about myself in order for me to be a more effective and productive leader, to be a more empathetic leader? Certainly, I think in the space that we're moving into now, asking people actually how they are and really listening to their responses is absolutely critical to where leaders are going to be in the future. And so that developing that deeper understanding of ourselves and how well that sits with our personality, our style and our preference is part of the reflection conversation that we would have with you as a coach. Certainly, I think one of the things that's been happening in the last 12 months, and I mean personally, just really reviewing, actually, what am I doing? What am I doing? Why am I doing it? Is it still important to me? You know, what is my purpose? You know, being really clear about the why, and it's something else that we will be exploring with you later. Because we have to think about ourselves in relation to the team and the organisation that we find ourselves in. And one of the things that coaching can help you to do is to explore where you are at the moment, but also where you want to be, given the situation that we found ourselves in the past 12 months, because we might have wanted to be in a space that no longer seems appropriate or suitable. So coaching can allow us to just explore some of that with you, and we can do that using a number of tools and techniques that we have at our disposal. And I'm going to be sharing one with you in a moment, and we're going to use it throughout this webinar to just demonstrate to you the way that we can use different tools at an individual level, at a team level, but also at an organisation level. Having that opportunity for reflection and critical thinking, as Harry's already mentioned, just being able, particularly I think at the minute for leadership teams, to be able to really go back to purpose and really think about what's important, being really clear about taking that reflection space, having a different perspective, really, really crucial. And I think one of the things about being independent is that we can offer that mirror. We can come in with fresh eyes and we can hold a mirror up to what we see and just say, is this your experience? Is this what you want? Is this the image that you actually want to be portraying? So there's something about the independence of a coach that is also really helpful to that dynamic relationship journey that we've spoken about. So one of the tools that we use, and we're not wedded to this particular tool, but we just wanted to show you that there are some tools that are available. And if you're a coach, or if you're in the world of HR and learning and development, you will recognise this. You might also recognise the MBTI. You might recognise Insights Discovery. These are tools that allow us to do that little bit, to give us that little bit more information about ourselves. And what DISC does is it talks to us about our preference, it talks to us about our traits, it talks to us about how we are and how we are perceived by others. And what this does in a coaching relationship is that it can help us to really think about, so if I'm a D, let's just say that that's me. If I'm a D, actually, what is my relationship like with the opposite trait? If I'm a person that is about fast pace, is about action, how am I going to work with somebody who is thoughtful and paced? How are we going to meet in the middle so that our communication is really heard? So we as leaders need to move towards our people, and we need our people to be moving towards us. And in the coaching relationship, we can help you on that journey. So it's really important that we use these tools to develop our relationship, to improve our conversation and our communication, and to provide that insight. And the DISC is a really helpful tool because it's really quick. It's a quick and easy way of thinking about who I am and where I am. And if you know other tools, that you'll be familiar with the notion. But what it does is it helps us to really explore who you are and how you relate with others. And if you wanted to do a quick analysis of yourself, if you're sitting there thinking, I wonder where I might be, that kind of D is that kind of strong will, focused, really quick thinking and responding. The I, so the DISC is dominance, it's influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. That's what the words stand for. And if you think about the axis, then the active and the thoughtful and the questioning, where might you find yourself on that? And what does that do when you're working alongside some other people? So on an individual level, we can really explore some of these things with you. And I want to leave you before I hand over to my colleague, Anne, just by saying, if you're thinking, it'd be really interesting to find out a little bit more about myself in relation to my team and my organisation, we'll be providing you with some of that information towards the end of this webinar. So thank you very much for listening. That's all from me, and I'm going to hand you over to Anne. Thank you, Anne.
Lovely, thanks Lorna. So to build on what Lorna was talking about, if we actually get a little bit more into depth about what we do in coaching, there's a bit of an inner and an outer game, as Lorna and Harry were just sort of signposting us towards. And it is a bit of a game. It's a bit of a game because our wonderful piece of kit between our ears is really not particularly well designed for the modern world. And so as coaches, understanding how our brain works at work, we're able to support leaders in being even more effective at work. So essentially around coaching, we're trying to increase the performance, the productivity, the effectiveness of our clients. And we do that by this very simple equation that Miles Downey has developed based on the work, the inner game of tennis, inner game of work, that Tim Galway way back in the 80s was first working on. And it's about our potential, which is based on our skills, our experience, who we are as a person, how we show up in the world, minus the interference. Now, the interference can be rather large at times, or it can be small, and it's about working with that interference so that we can maximize the potential. And it's through the conversations and the different tools and strategies that we use. And so Lorna there was indicating about disc style, so awareness of disc style and how we can modify how our potential interference by our style, by being quite quick paced and wanting snappy decisions, actually somebody who might be more of an S or a C style, that slower thinking, more considered, might actually shut down their thinking. And actually they may feel that actually at times in an exaggerated form might be considered to be bullying. Now that's, I know I'm often brought in to support leaders who are accused of being bullies, and they are devastated that they are seen as that way, because that is so not their intent. It's just unconscious behavior that has led to that problem. And so there's something about us understanding that, and that self-awareness becomes so much more important. I was working with a senior leader just this week who had been for 5 years, had experienced what she considers bullying from one of her co-workers, another senior leader. And actually by working with her and doing the work that Lorna was talking about, practicing some of these skills on giving feedback and that interpersonal space, it has transformed the relationship. And she just came back to the next session looking completely different. The physiology had shifted and changed. And it's because as we understand what's going on in the brain and how that interference affects our thinking capacity. What happens to our brain over the last year? How many of you have experienced overload, overwhelm, as you've been trying to deliver and in times of uncertainty? Uncertainty is really challenging for our brain. Our certainty about what we're going to do next, all of these different things, and a sense of unfairness. You know, we've obeyed the rules and still we can't get back to work. And, you know, the uncertainty about what's happening, you know, in Europe at the moment with their third world, how's it going to impact on us and the plans we're putting into place to getting back to face-to-face working. All of these are threats to our brain. And what happens is, what we see on the left-hand side is our brain shrinks a bit. The bit of the prefrontal cortex, a really clever bit of our brain, because of the emotional charge that happens, it actually becomes less engaged and less able to work together. And through our coaching interventions, we're able to bring the brain back into whole integrated working so that it's able to think about solutions rather than problems. One of the challenges in that threat brain state is our self-awareness goes down. So that issue Lorna was just talking about becomes more exaggerated. And so by creating that safe, compassionate space, we're able to increase the engagement of the leaders' brains and support them in working about how to work with the teams. I mean, sometimes we're brought into teams that can't even bear to be in the same room as each other. And by able to navigate with the brain in mind, we're able to open up the thinking of everybody's and shift them from counting the seconds till they retire to going, I know what my sense of purpose is. I know what I'm here to do. And to see that sense of re-engagement over a matter of hours is just a delight. And I think all the coaches in the room are now smiling because we know what that feels like to be able to move people and shift those behaviours quite quickly. And how does this then relate in terms of as a leadership team? We work with individual leaders, but we also work with groups of leaders. And this is a team of senior leaders. And this is the profile building on from that DISC report that Lorna was talking about. So anyway, it's all about work of leaders as well, which looks, and work of leaders has 3 elements to it. It has the vision, and that's being clear about where you're going, alignment, getting everybody to sign up to that new vision, and then the actual execution and the delivery. And if we look at this report in a little more detail, you can see that the exploration bit, they're very good at looking at the horizon, seeing what needs to be addressed, what they should be focusing on. They're not so good at sharing that with their teams and being courageous about, once you've done that research and that opening up, what do we do about it? And then testing assumptions, actually drawing people in. Are we on the right? They're not bad at that. They're very good at being clear about what needs to be done. But then the other bits around dialogue and inspiration, that the numbers are a bit low. So actually inspiring people through telling stories, giving examples, perhaps that's something they need a bit more support on how to do that. And then the execution, and that links a bit to the inspiration, is the momentum isn't quite there, and the feedback. One of the things that we've got at the moment is that we need teams to be innovative, creative thinking, and flexible. And for that, you need the engagement of your teams, and they need to know how they're doing. They need to be, as Fiona was saying, there's a piece about how well are we doing in COVID? What have we learned? What do we want to hold on to? What's going well? All of those things are often missing. And this team is one that I would suggest is one that's actually very task focused. And there's a leader I've been working with currently who's merging different organisations, and he's exceptional at the tasks involved in change management. However, what he's forgotten to do, because his brain is so full, is to think about the emotional engagement. So some of the teams are feeling really scared and uncertain. They don't even know where their desk is going to be. So if a leader can give clarity, because we know that's really important to the brain, it can help them manage that change and that transition so much better. And people don't feel bullied, they don't feel isolated, they feel part of the team. So a lot of the rhetoric you hear in poor cultures where things are going wrong are often because we're not managing with the brain in mind. And with that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Fiona, who's going to talk more about teams.
So thank you very much, Anne. Before we actually go further into teams, there's a great question. So Shaquille, thank you ever so much. I'm going to answer it, and I'm just going to warn Anne, I'm going to pass it on to her as well. So the question is, there's a lot of pushback on personality type tools, that they lack rigor, and you're curious to get our thoughts on that. There can be criticism, there can be applause. Whatever you receive as a result of using a profile, it's about opening the conversation. Yes, whatever we use, we believe we're validated in it, and it's been validated. The reality is that people will push back because they're not very comfortable with feedback. And yes, they might have some preference for another profile that could also have been used, but the reality is about the richness of the conversations we bring to the fore. So Annie, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, the conversation, it's a conversation starter. And yes, there is a whole dialogue going around personality and what is fixed, what evolves, what changes, and it links to our sense of identity. So real rich discussion out there, which is very exciting. And you are not your disc. And the disc is how you're describing yourself. And that sense of identity then influences how you behave, because your values get linked into it. You'll find people who are a D, they like efficiency, they like results, they like productivity. So there is an interesting mix in there. And yes, I mean, DISC is a pragmatic tool. It isn't as well validated in terms of psychological as the big five. And so we hold it lightly. And it is part of that dialogue. So thank you. It's a great question. And the field is rich with dialogue at the moment, which I love. And yes, you are not your disc style is probably where I'd like to leave it. And you can constantly evolve and adapt. Your behavior is malleable, and it depends on the story that you've got running behind that and what you're well practiced at, because that will then become your neurology. Your neurology will have laid down patterns of behavior. And in coaching, it's about bringing that awareness to you and looking at, so what is it you want to achieve and where does that align? Thanks, Fiona.
Thank you, Anne. And the way I introduce DISC or any of the profiles we use, it is not an excuse to be in that style. It is absolutely about opening up our awareness to other styles and how we best adapt to relate better to everybody in our team. So it's not an excuse. No profile should never be an excuse for a behavior. It's absolutely about that self-awareness and growing and learning more about yourself and each other. So thank you for that. And please do continue to add to the Q&A. So over to teams in a bit more detail. And so team coaching, if I give you a definition around a team, it is a team of people working together. We've got groups who perhaps have got a common professional interest, but we're focusing here on specific team dynamics. And when we start with a team, we'd explore what's happening. We'd meet on one-on-one with each of the members of team to really understand what's happening. We'd ask them to complete a profile. And we'd come into their first workshop to really define that goal that they all want to contribute to. And we create that environment that is without fear or judgment, really important, where they are a voice. They represent a voice of the system they work in, and can share what's happening from their perspective. And so often for us as coaches, I'm sure, when we go into an organisation, it's not what people are doing that necessarily needs the most focus. We think managers are quite good at managing tasks and actions and holding people to account. The reality is that the biggest benefit is often around behaviours, and this is exactly where team coaching and relationship coaching can really play to our strengths. And we get them to look at within the team or outside of the team. And here's an example using one of the DISC profiles. This is a project team. So if you look at it, yes, that is the leader on the left-hand side, very results-driven, with a team of people who are action-orientated, very enthusiastic and love collaboration. They're working on an engineering project. Okay, so in team coaching, what we do is we hold up that mirror. We help reveal the system to themselves to help them understand what that means for them and how they work together. So it was interesting for them to explore in a bit more depth their DISC styles and understand who could move into that accuracy, into that stability challenge area, in that role of support for within the team. And quite quickly, we identified strengths in other areas. And remember, these are our strengths that we're looking at. And it doesn't mean to say we can't do any of the others. So can everybody cross their arms, please? Okay, so you might be crossing your arm in one way. Now try and cross it the other way. Yeah. A little bit more thought, a little bit more consciousness in it. And that's exactly what we mean about profiles. It doesn't say we can't do the other part of the profile. It doesn't mean to say we can't adapt. We just have to do it with a little bit more effort and a little bit more conscious thinking. So that was literally holding up the light to them, letting them understand their style, the impact it would have on their work as engineering project, and what it meant for how they needed to adapt their style and stretch themselves within that team. I'd like to introduce you to the 5 behaviours of a cohesive team. And we do some very clear underlying principles when we bring teams together. We create some assumptions for them to explore and sign up to. So every one of the assumptions or the principles we will introduce is every member of the team is a voice of the system. So everybody can contribute. And that everyone is right, only partially. Because guess what? We've all got different perspectives and we can all have a view that we think is right, but actually it's one perspective and let's hear the other perspectives. And then the system that they're part of is at a constant stage of emergence, constantly changing. It's naturally intelligent, it's generative, in other words, it creates its own solutions, and it is creative. So with that in mind, introducing the 5 behaviours of a cohesive team, where the exec members were invited to identify their DISC profile, and then identify what they considered the levels of each of these were within the team. So let's start on trust. We're not working on predictive trust. Predictive trust is where you can trust me to do something or not. Yeah, you can rely on Fiona to deliver. She'll deliver on time. Or you can rely or not to. There's different levels of trust. We're looking at vulnerability-based trust. And if you think back in the pandemic, the leaders who have been exceptionally quoted are those who've been able to share their vulnerabilities, who've been able to share perhaps what's happening behind them at home because they're on Zoom, they're in front of everybody, they're up there, they're visible, and they're able to share what's happening in their lives and how it's impacting in them. And so within a team, especially within an executive team, we focus on vulnerability-based trust, where they can ask for help without fear or judgment, where they can say, I've messed up without fear or judgment, where they can say, I'm really struggling with this without fear or judgment. And once they've achieved that, they can then move on to conflict, and we help them explore, I'm going to say safe conflict. We help them explore how to have conflict together within that team, because until they feel they can contribute in that safe environment where they can put their views forward, then they're not able to move into commitment. And that commitment then helps them move forward as a team, leave the room and make whatever they've just agreed to actually happen. And then they hold each other to account. We help them understand what that means. So instead of the boss They actually hold each other to account. And then obviously the results are following as a result. So that's the 5 behaviours of a cohesive team. We reveal the system to them. We help them understand where their strengths are and where their areas of greatest opportunity for growth are. And why is this important? For this team particularly, there was a 49% improvement in productivity. And that improvement can be seen because there's no hidden agendas, because their issues are shared, they're voiced, and they're resolved openly. They're not resolved around the water cooler, over the coffee machine. They resolve them collectively and collaboratively, and they share those agendas. So that's the joy of team coaching and the great business benefit of it. So I'm going to pass over to Mike to build on that even further. Thank you, Mike.
Great. Well, thanks, Fiona, for that really helpful insight into team coaching. I'm just going to spend a few minutes now talking about stuff that we can do with businesses around strategy. And I'm conscious that strategy is a word that's a bit like Marmite. It can generate a certain reaction in people, and it's a often overused word. And hopefully what I'll do in the next few minutes is help to set some scene, a good scene around what strategy is and how we can help businesses. So you've been looking at your screens for about half an hour now. I'd just like to encourage you just to lift your eyes, just look a little bit ahead, refocus on the wall or out the window ahead of you, and just stretch those muscles a bit in your eyes, and then you can bring them back. Now, we know that's a really good thing to do. Anybody that's worked anywhere for any length of time would have been told that that's something they should do on a regular basis. Similarly, as we're driving, we look at occasionally long distance ahead, just to assess the road ahead of us. And so with our businesses, we also should, and I'm sure do, look long term ahead, but not as a permanent feature of what we do, because if we didn't look at our screens or didn't look close up while we were driving, things would go wrong in the immediate day-to-day of what we're doing. And the same is true of our businesses. But it's really important that we look ahead and that we take conscious time and make that time happen as part of our regular rhythm and routine through the year. So long-term looking and planning is a really good thing to do. We know it's really good. It's like eating healthily and it's like exercise, but often things can get in the way of that. So my point here is that running a business is really important to do things, the operational stuff. And for so many over the last 12 to 15 months, survival into the next week has been a critical factor, let alone wondering what on earth we're going to be doing at the end of 2021 and into the next year. So here's just an illustration I use with people I work with around strategy to understand what strategy really is. So here it is around, imagining that we've got to get imagining a city break, you're going to Edinburgh, you're going to the Fringe. Imagine that's on this year and you're going up to the Fringe, you're going to have a lovely time and you can envisage where you're going and what you're going to be doing when you get there. So that's very much like having the vision of a business. What is your purpose and your direction, that Lorna was alluding to earlier. But of course, how you're going to get there is going to be very different. You've got a number of options, different ways of doing it. To pick up on the theme of the New Street station and the hub, you could catch the train. You could fly, you could drive, or if you were feeling particularly energetic and had the right kind of equipment, you could cycle. Not sure what you'd feel like when you got to the end, but so your decisions around your means of transport is really effectively your strategy. How are you going to get to your destination? And strategy can vary. You might find that you broke down in your car on the way and you needed to pick up the train en route. And similarly, strategy can flex according to the circumstances that you're in. So strategy bridges that gap between your vision as a business and the actual day-to-day activities that you're going to do. Because as you step out the door to travel to Edinburgh, your first few steps are going to be the same, but you could be walking to your car, or you could be walking to a taxi. And so it's important to get that long-term view so that you're looking beyond those next few steps. Let me just move on to the next one. So We know very much, especially as the last 12 to 15 months have demonstrated, that what worked yesterday may not work tomorrow. In fact, what works today may not work tomorrow. And so that longer term perspective is really important, particularly in a post-COVID recovery and post-Brexit context. And the thing I really like to say to everybody that I work with is that everyone has a strategy, even if they don't realize it. Your strategy may be just to wing it, just to make it up and respond to the situation as you go along. And frankly, the last 12 months, for many people, that has had to be a strategy of survival, of responding to circumstances and understanding what the latest announcements mean to your staff, to your ability to produce and deliver your services. So your strategy can change, and it should change. It should be flexible. But if you're winging it all the time, and I'm sure if you're in big organizations and even smaller ones that you don't wing it, but my encouragement to everyone now is, as we come out of these very difficult months, is to start looking ahead and to take another look at the future. Find the right strategy that's right for you. So it's about being intentional, and that's what we're encouraging business to do, is to be intentional in their planning. So versatile leaders, picking up on some of the points that have been made by some of the earlier speakers, you may be more comfortable working at an operational level. If you look at these double-headed arrows in what you do, you may be more operationally focused. That may be your natural style, but it's important to be really effective as a leader, that you can move seamlessly from one end to the other of these arrows, that at times you can be strategic, and you can lift yourself out of the detail to spend time doing that. Equally, if you're watching your team and you're driving your team, as with that example that Fiona gave, you need to occasionally allow for your team to enable. You need to enable your team and develop them and give them the skills to be able to do what they need to do. So versatile leadership is all about moving between these. And so moving to the strategic end from time to time is really key in order to be really successful, whether you're running your own business or whether you've got a function or department that you're running within an organization. And the quotes I've got up there are simple quotes from Kaplan and Kaiser, who have this versatile leadership model that they've worked with and published on over the recent years. But versatile leaders consistently the most effective leaders, and they don't sit in the middle of those arrows, but they move seamlessly and easily from one end to the other. But the challenge is making that happen. The challenge is actually doing those things, and coaching can help leaders have the confidence to do that, moving between those ends of these arrows. So what does this look like? So I'm just going to kind of reflect on a particular client that I've worked with recently, and also the model that I often use with people is the concept of the golden circle that Simon Sinek has become well known for. The idea that in vision and purpose, we really know why our organizations exist. And that can also apply so much in terms of department or function. What is the core purpose? What is it? What's the legacy that you're wanting to leave in 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time? The what around the outside is very much the day-to-day activity. And the bit that sometimes gets left out is the how. The strategy for actually delivering it. So working with a recent client, we worked on some strategy myth busting. So strategy isn't soft and fluffy. It's not head in the cloud stuff. It really does deliver tangible business benefits, as they reflected back to me earlier this month when I went back to them 3 months after my work with them. They really felt that it had delivered something tangible. Labeling something as strategic doesn't mean that it is strategic. It can be a label that's used to demonstrate or show that some thinking's been applied. And it's never it can be too late to work out who your ideal clients are when you're looking at your marketing strategy, because your marketing strategy should be about your products and services, and that they should be targeted at your ideal clients. So understanding who they are at the beginning is really key. that really is what I wanted to say. You know, strategy is a misused, often overused word, but it does really deliver tangible benefits to business. And the challenge is making that happen. A recent poll I did on LinkedIn showed that 75% of the respondents believed that strategy and long-term planning were important. They all did, but only 75% planned it. Of those, just under half, so 35%, were interrupted or stopped from doing it because their diary was overtaken by others. So coaching with you can help develop the strategy, but also work through and how to make it happen as we go forward. So I'll finish now and hand over back to Harry. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mike, and thanks to all the rest of the panel for their input. I think we've all done enough of these sort of webinars now across the audience to know that getting a lot of this input can be quite tiring and sapping, but we hope it's kept your interest, and you've heard about the experience and the insights that our coaches and members of the panel have got. I think there's some really interesting stuff in there, and certainly from my job perspective, I think hearing about change and improvement and results really is what it's about, because I've heard so many stories about things going on and there's no output and no change at the end. But hopefully you've heard more positive news than that today. We're now going to take some of the questions we've had, try to move things on and look at the poll, because we have a great response to the poll. And to get the ball rolling, because I'll involve the panel. And again, thank you for your questions. If you've got any others, please put them in. But one of the first ones we've had is typically what sort of issues do clients bring to you for coaching support? Let's start with Anne. Give us some insight on that subject, Anne.
Okay, so at the moment, quite a wide range of issues. Overwhelm has been a really common one in terms of having the time to process and work through what's essential, what they need to do now. Dealing with teams that are overwhelmed. I daren't ask them to do any more, and yet we need to be doing something different. So giving the space and time to look at that, that's been a biggie. Culture, feeling like it's a bit of a bullying culture, a little bit isolated, people that remote, the whole thing around the brain and understanding how the brain's working at work is another very common thing. And thinking about how do we get people back into the workplace and how do we plan safely for that and reassure people around that. So those are probably the top themes at the moment that I'm getting, Harry.
Thanks a lot, Anne. Lorna, what's your view?
Thanks, Harry. I'd agree with a lot of what Anne's said there. So the conversations that I've been having of late have been around how do I motivate my team? How do I bring my team back together for people who have been carrying on through the pandemic and people who have been furloughed? Actually, how am I going to bring those people together? And what does that new team need to look like, given the circumstances that we've all lived through over the past 12 months? So lots of information about actually what does this new team need to be? And how can we make sure that it is taking the best of the past, but also looking forward? Because I think we can spend a lot of time reviewing at the minute. I think we're all in kind of reflective mode, but actually we still need to think about continuing to deliver. And I particularly do quite a lot of work in the public sector space where people have been continuing to deliver over the last 12 months. And also members of the team have been operating from elsewhere. So it is actually how do we bring those teams back together to make sure that they can be effective in the new space, whatever the new space looks like.
That's great. Thank you. Fiona, what are your thoughts?
Yes, thank you. So definitely ditto. And to add to it, I host the local Engage for Success network. And one of the things we're noticing is the impact of language right now. And it's about how do you convey the messages that are right. So the word back to work has really resulted in quite a bit of pushback, even with the Engage for Success network, where people have felt insulted because we've been working all this time. So it's about how do we communicate and helping leaders communicate. So moving forward is probably the language we need to be using instead of going back, because actually we're not going back to anything really in reality. there's very little happening that used to happen, perhaps apart from the service and the product, but how we work has changed quite considerably. So in team coaching, I've been helping people look at the systems, the processes, and the people aspect. What are you leaving behind? What are you taking with you? So building on what Lorna was saying. So those are key things to be mindful for yourself as leaders and think through. So how do I really position moving forward to work or workplace? Because maybe people aren't coming back to the work place. They're staying in their workspace. Yeah. Thank you.
Right, let's get a final comment from Mike. Mike, around strategy or other issues that Panelists brought to you?
I think the things I'm talking with people about are how do they manage their remote teams? How do they continue to do that? And obviously that's evolved over the last year. But so ditto much of what's already been said. I think in terms of strategy, it's very much how do we engage in forward-looking, how quickly do we need to look up, how certain is the future, how far ahead can we plan? And the kinds of things I'm saying to people are that you have to have a strategy that suits the environment, and therefore you can have a shorter term strategy. It's not a 5-year plan for everybody by any stretch.
Great, thank you. I want to move on because we're getting some great questions. One of the questions we have now is biggest challenge in getting leaders is to slow down and think about the why, when too many are focused on the what. How can we break that mindset and get leaders thinking differently? Lorna, what's your thoughts?
I think it's a great question because it's so interesting, particularly for leaders who have always been in the space of getting the job done and making sure that the company or the business is successful. And I think the space that we need to be moving into is that emotional intelligence space where we are more aware not only of how we're feeling, but we are genuinely interested in the feelings and the emotions and the circumstance of the people that are around us. And I have been working with a leadership team who have been very process, in the past they've been very process driven. And what that has meant is that the people that they manage are not feeling like they're getting the emotional support, particularly for those people who've been working from home and having to educate kids at the same time. So actually leaders really need to start thinking about, and what I did with this team was start thinking about actually how would it be if we started to ask those questions as routinely, if we started to move into that space, that emotional intelligence space, where we really understood some of the kind of connections and the social responsibilities that our managers have. So I think there's a vulnerability that Fiona was talking about as part of that exploration of team. Actually, how can we be vulnerable with one another and still deliver what we need to deliver? And how do we create those safe spaces where we can ask for help and also make some of those, ask for some of those challenging conversations to take place? So I think there's a number of things I think that we can do.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah.
And what's your insight?
Thanks, Harry. I echo what Lorna said, and there's something as well. We make it like it's got to be a big thing, and sometimes it's what difference are we here to make? What difference can we make today? Sometimes just reconnecting with what we're doing, it's amazing how that can motivate and engage people so quickly. Working with some ITU specialist team the other day, and sometimes they lose sight, and you'd think they'd know exactly what they're doing, but actually just sometimes reconnecting with it, because in the days, it's been such a challenge for them. And actually, we're here to help people get better. And all the reporting they got was the number of people who had died. And so they actually changed the reporting. The exec team actually decided to tell the whole hospital how many people were leaving ITU. Our purpose is to make people well. Not just care for the sick, we want to make people well, and that's more motivating. It engages people and it shifts the culture like nothing else when we're clear of purpose. And so actually there's some simple ways of doing it through some simple questions and inviting people to say, so what are you here today to do? Those sort of things, reconnecting with what's the difference you're here to make.
That's great, thank you. I'm very conscious of time now, and we've kept you engaged hopefully for nearly the past hour, but I don't want to finish without looking at the poll. We asked you about 7 issues, and interestingly, the responses we've had is that coaches have been used across all of those issues, is what you've told us back. The highest scoring was developing leaders. The lowest scoring is greater inclusion and diversity of thought. But it's really interesting that people are already using coaches to respond to COVID on Brexit. Be great to hear about some of the experiences of that. We're getting some of our own, but building knowledge, I think, around that is going to be really important. Any comments from the panelists? Fiona's thoughts on the feedback we've had so far?
You just caught me as I was writing a response, so I'm hoping it's the right response because I was concentrating in the chat. So from a leader's perspective, I take data in to help them understand the reality of what's happening. So I help them, they are logical decision makers on the whole, and I encourage them to look at what's happened as a result of COVID and move forward. That probably wasn't the right answer to the question you asked, but I hope it was a help.
That's great. Mike, have you got any final comment?
Yeah, I think, my background, last thing I did before I left the corporate world was prepare a large energy company for Brexit. And I think that it's about as much developing the leaders to be able to think and work in a way that responds to particular situations. So I would probably put responding to COVID and or Brexit as is a subcategory in one sense of developing leaders.
Yeah, and it's a very topical thing probably to end on, because I'm winding up the Q&A session now, and I'm going to hand you back to Diane just to summarise and say thank you.
Participating in the chat and also in the Q&A and the poll. Thank you. Really interesting poll results from my point of view. It will be interesting to do it again in 12 months' time and to see, as we're emerging from COVID and perhaps getting a little bit more used to the vagaries of the Brexit negotiations, whether or not those results change over the next 12 months. To close, I'm going to return to where we started, which is why a hub. And a hub, because we think of ourselves and our practice, and hopefully our presentation today demonstrates to you that we're a single starting point, whatever your coaching journey might be, whatever your coaching destination might be. So whether you're looking to develop your leaders, enhance customer satisfaction, etc., as we go around this wheel here, we'd very much look forward to having a conversation with you and explore how coaching could support you. As a first step, we're going to write to you all after the event today and send you a link where you can look at some sample reports for both the DISC profile, work of leaders, and the 5 behaviours. They will have a name on the front of them. We are very mindful of confidentiality, so let me assure you that those names are completely and utterly fictitious. They're just for illustration only. So I'd like to say thank you again to all my wonderful colleagues, those who have spoken today, and all those within Work Horizons Coaching Hub who have helped get us to this point today, and look forward to working with you in the future. I'd like to say a big thank you to you today, our guests, for coming along and helping us celebrate our launch. We're really grateful that you've given up an hour of your time to spend with us and help us celebrate as we move forward. As I say, we're a Birmingham-based company, but we're working nationally, and we're looking to grow as well. And we'd really welcome your support, whether that's feedback from today, any questions you've got, or any thoughts you might have on how we can grow our business. Thank you. We appreciate it very much. So I'm going to close there for now. As I say, we'll write to you in the next couple of days. Very best wishes for an Easter break for you. I hope you find it relaxing and refreshing, as well as getting some eggs if that's what you enjoy doing. I hope the sun shines. And we hope that we see you again to a future webinar within Work Horizons. We hope you keep safe. For those who have not yet had your vaccine, those of us here, I think, have all had ours. We're old enough to have been in that group. I hope you get your vaccine soon, and that 2021 is a healthier and a more productive and happy year for us all. Thank you for joining us today.